What is going on, everybody? Welcome to A Case of Distrust. I'm your host, the Birdman Otis Falcon. This right here caught my eye just because of the awesome art style and design. I'm a big sucker for just unique looking games, and this right here just caught my eye, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna look into this here. And I did, and this is kind of like a weird little mixture of a Sherlock Holmes meets Phoenix Wright. And I sunk a lot of time to the Phoenix Wright series, so I'm fairly excited about that too. Here you're playing the role of a PI in the 1920s San Francisco, so it's got that entire, detective mystery gritty look to it. If you enjoy this on the channel, want to see a bit more, you know what to do. Let me know in the comments, let me know by leaving a thumbs up, and we can indeed do that. But for now, let's go into A Case of Distrust. I haven't played this beforehand, so I'm coming in here blind. But, it's a mystery game, so I think that's kind of like the way to play it. I awoke in my desk chair. Across from me were his piercing amber eyes. They surprised me at first, but I should have known he'd be there. I stretched and said, mid-yawn, not very nice to sneak into a sleeping woman's apartment, but his stare just continued. This is fairly intriguing thus far. Okay, so I cursed the open window. Of course, that's how he'd entered. I'd hoped to finally rest my eyes a while, but fate often disagrees with me. I knew I didn't have what he wanted. Reaching into my coat, I took out my knife and flicked it open. Yo, you're about to get robbed or something or what? I gave him the knife. I held the knife steady. I'm not gonna give him a knife. I held the knife steady while staring back at him. Look, I said, nodding towards the desk. That's all there is. Take it or leave it. But a detective knows when she's beat, and I knew then. He wanted to search the place, and that's what he would do. I sighed, knowing my weakness for his type. Alright, I said. Let's look. Oh, it was a cat. It was a cat. That's good. He let out a gleeful meow in victory. I cut a piece of my apple that the cat had rejected. Always a sore winner, I jabbed, but I was smiling too, because I was telling the truth. There was absolutely no other food in my apartment. Dude, I'm digging this thus far. Good color combinations and everything. Good little, transitions as well. Alright, the cat often dropped by to scavenge. He made a lot of noise when he thought I was holding out on him. But right now, the place was clean empty. No food anywhere. I had to prove it to him. So how do we prove we have no food? You want to go check out my fridge? Is that the thing here? The regular white icebox tinged yellow with aged half blocked the kitchen doorway. My income rarely kept me stocked in it, and right now it was empty. Cat, there's no food in there, man. The cat had waltzed into my apartment a few years earlier. He kept coming back, though there was rarely a morsel to eat. He'd continue his loud meowing until I proved to him the place was empty of food. It doesn't matter how doe-eyed you are, cutie pie. We got no food around, I told him. He licked his chops and looked at me. Apparently, he still didn't believe that. I needed to contradict him somehow, to show him something in the apartment that would prove it was empty of food. So now we're doing the entire Phoenix Wright thing. Objection! But here we're contradicting. So, show the cat there's no food. Well, we got evidence too. Oh, this is cool. Statements. So, this will be stuff that we get from people. Actual evidence. Well, we do have an empty icebox, so that would be my evidence right there. Used to contradict. I opened the icebox so the cat could see inside. Empty, I told him. The cat looked quizzically at the open door, then back at me. Sorry, fella. There's no grub in there for me either. He stared at me with his eyes as disappointed as I felt. Those big yellows always got to my soul. Thoughts of my family filled my head. But never mind. Those thoughts. At the time, there were distractions. I moved on from them. A loud meow from the cat snapped my thoughts back into the moment. I took a deep breath and grinned back at him. Guess you can scram now, I said. Nobody's gonna come knocking with food for you, fella. And just like that, there's our knock with food, apparently. There immediately came a banging on the front door. Beyond the nuisance, this cat was psychic too. You order out, I asked him. Open the door. Oh, dude, that's awesome. Alright, so in the doorway was the regrettably familiar face of Connor Green. Oh, and we have a green tint happening as well. I stared at him. I looked past him. His company churned my stomach. Let's look past him. I looked past him, peering left and right into the hallway. I heard a woman's heels marching down the carpeted stairs, but otherwise the building was silent and empty. Evidently, Green had come alone. He stared at me through the doorway with a coy smile. Well, ain't you gonna invite me inside? I let him through. I started closing the door. Let's just close the door on this guy. He looks like a creeper. Look at that smile. That's a creeper smile right there if I've ever seen one. I started closing the door, but he stuck out a foot to stop me. Hey now! He chided. Foul way to treat a customer, Malone. So that was his angle, hiring me as a detective. I wonder what a bootlegger would need with a private eye, but he answered without my prompt. I'll make this quick. I can't take this to the hog house or the pigs would laugh me out. And other dicks just aren't tempting. Yeah, I know he means a private eye. It's still funny to me because I'm very immature. His grin widened. Thought this was going to be quick, I said, and started rolling a cigarette. It wasn't quick, and I'd already rolled and lighted a second smoke when Green finally finished his story. I noted the important bits in my book. It started with a letter slipped under his door in a white envelope. The envelope contained a single typewritten leaf, which he handed to me. It read, "End your game, or we'll end you." It had no signature, instead ending with only a small scribble in the bottom right corner that resembled a black hand. Green had a lead on a new rum running scheme, a connection from Vancouver. He'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who ran the Tin Spoon speakeasy for mob boss Jerry Ferry. They'd agree to buy it for more. Green surmised the letter was about his rum running. He suspected Redstone Stable, another bootlegger, of sending the letter. He told me that the stable ran a barber shop during the day and gave me the address. Green needed to know who the threat was from. He'd get Paul's gang to deal with them and continue his scheme to get rich. If I go snooping myself, he concluded, folks see I'm not trusting people. No trust leads to no customers. I need to play it low-key, which is where you come in. I raised an eyebrow and stared at him through the cigarette smoke. Something in his yarn was still twisted. He must have noticed my reticence, because he said, "You know, I work closely with Lewis. I'm sure he'd want to protect me as much as any other victim." My uncle. Lewis had put me on the force to begin with, made me the first policewoman for the San Francisco PD. He was the only one who let me walk the beats with him, or do more, at crime scenes than comfort a widow. He'd been obsessed with helping victims and bringing justice to those beyond salvation. After he'd taken his own life, I quit the San Francisco PD. There was little more I could do there. I started my own practice, taking his ethos to heart. Was Green worth my time? Would he be worth Lewis's? Green had tipped off my uncle in a few cases. I wondered if that was enough to warrant my protection. Before I could think past my headache, he threw a bill in my lap. "Keep the C-note as a retainer. And don't worry about getting in touch. I'll find you later for a chat." He turned down the hallway and I let him go. If he was willing to give me $100 with no commitment, I wouldn't stop him. Well, we do need money apparently. Can't even keep the fridge stocked. I turned back to my apartment, still confused about the whole story. My headache wasn't helping either. Whenever I lacked clarity, a trip to Southern Coffee was usually the cure. There was only one place I needed to go to clear my head. Southern Coffee. I waved down a taxi cab and was on my way. I thought I might talk with the driver to pass the time. Yeah, let's go for it. He started talking about boxing. "My brother was traveling out east last fall. Won a couple of tickets to a boxing match in a dice game. Wouldn't you know it? It's the Dempsey fight." Now let it go. "I don't want to hear about your boxing tales, man. We soon arrived at the destination." I do wonder though, probably talking to these people, you'll get some random information for other stuff down the line. Could be the case. Southern Coffee was in the Automat Diner. Ethel Burgess, the lone waitress, was friendly to help with any inquiry. Of course, if you winked at her right, she'd show you the way to the downstairs toilet, where Frankie played bathroom attendant. Southern Coffee had the distinct feeling of home. The The familiar smell of mold in that old basement was enough to put a grin on my face. Frankie tended the bar at Southern Coffee, though it wasn't his place. I'd never caught a whiff of the real owners. They trusted Frankie to do what he did best. I said, "Hello, Frankie," and was met with a smile and a grunt from Franklin Ernest Conway. He was a big fella, for you, both white and tall, and must have been a little over 50. He had a round head, kind brown eyes, and a cropped ring of gray hair encircling an otherwise bald scalp. His voice had a warm timbre that complemented the tobacco and whiskey smells of his speakeasy. I sat at the bar. "You got the spooks, PC?" he asked. "You're worn out as a catcher's mitt." I suppose my exhaustion showed. "I won $100 for nothing, and I can't let it go." I told Frankie about the case, the threatening letter sent to Connor Green, how he assumed it was related to his bootlegging, and his suspicion of Redstone Stable. "Well, Green's case is better than most of what you've given," he said with that enthusiasm. "At least it's not more of that adultery bunk." "Sure," I replied. But I started with a goal in mind. What's the point in helping a man like Green? Frankie clicked his tongue on his teeth. "Lawyer or priest? What does it matter? Let me ask you, are the clients you have now the types you'd want to help?" Let's be legit here. I admitted they weren't. I told them that I'd wanted more from my detecting life. "It could be what Green's case shoots your career forward, Malone." I sighed and stared at my own drink. But my daze was interrupted by the basement door opening and slamming shut. Ugh. A small blustering woman began marching towards me. She was wearing a light blue clutch hat with a gray ribbon, tilted back on her head. A scarf of similar blue draped around her neck, but I was startled by what she wore under it. A gray trench coat that looked too large for her frame. It was exactly like the one that had belonged to Lewis. She hurled insults at me. A while, all I could do was sit and take it until she ran out of gas and started breathing heavily. I set my drink on the bar and looked at her in the eyes. I inserted a hello. "Hello, I'm Phyllis Malone. How can I help you?" accompanied by a smile as genuine as I could muster. That knocked her off balance. She stumbled over her next few words and I added, "And you are?" The flame returned to her eyes between clenched teeth and she hissed, "I'm the wife of the bum who sneaks into your bed." Oh, we're going there now, are we? I asked the cat. "Where'd you get that code?" I just gaped. Gotta go with the cat. The cat, but humor wasn't her angle, and she launched into another poetic stanza. "And he just left your sty this morning," she finally ended. And that was when I gathered she was Connor Green's wife. "Mrs. Green, I'm a PI, not a homewrecker." "A woman in that line of work?" she questioned. "I don't believe it." Let's try to prove it. Green's letter. I told her about why Connor had come to me, the bootlegging and the threats. "You see, Mrs. Green, this is what I do. There's not much more I can show you to prove it." It still took more coaxing for her to believe me, but eventually she came around. She seemed grateful I'd explained it to her. Apparently she had seen her husband leave my apartment, and distraught, she had followed me all the way to Frankie's basement and decided to confront me. I suppose I lost my head after what I'd seen, and she began to cry. Frankie, ever chivalrous to a dimpled girl, came around the bar and held her up. "Now that's alright, Mrs. Green. Why don't I hail you a cab and send you back home?" She agreed, and they walked together up the stairs. When Frankie returned, I said to him, "You turned night real quick." He snorted a laugh. "Ah, hell. We can't have that siren in here. With a torture yell like that, every street bugger would have come to her rescue." Mrs. Green is a torch singer. Well, I learned she was Mrs. Connor Green just now, when she came in here. I'd only seen her as Little Fanny, singing lead for the jazz band at the Tin Spoon. "The Tin Spoon," I said. "Tiny Paul's joint? That's where Green is selling his liquor. Say, you think it's where she met her husband?" I laughed. "You're the real sleuth, Frankie." He made a sarcastic bow. I shook my head. "You're telling me you escorted our little torturer out just to avoid a bit of hot water?" Frankie flushed and said, "What are you talking about, Malone?" I was never good with emotions, but it was plain that Frankie had instantly fallen for the girl. So what if I had more to squeeze out of her, I asked. What more could you possibly want from little Fanny? She can't have anything to do with Green's mess. Contradict? Is there anything over here to contradict? The Great Code? Let's use that. Did you notice her clothes? That gray trench, maybe? I posed to him. It looked a bit too large on her, don't you think? I thought she looked lovely, he said. That trench, I continued, belonged to Lewis. Frankie's eyes widened. So that scumbag Green might actually have been close to your uncle, he exclaimed. Or she might have. Either way, it's not a total bunk. I stood up from the bar stool. What had just happened was quite the ruckus. It seemed like my cue to move along. The worn stairs led to the outside world. Let's leave. I was heading up the stairs when Frankie called after me. So, what are you gonna do? I'd been thinking about little Fanny. I suppose even mobsters had people who cared about them. And she'd been wearing Lewis's old jacket, so perhaps Green and Lewis had been closer than I realized. I guess I'll take Connor Green's bait, I replied. I've got nothing better on the stove, and he might need the help. Something still stinks, though. Well, what's your plan? The way I see it, I have 3 goals right now. Green hired me for a job. Find the guy who wrote the letter. That's the basic part. But you want more? I nodded. Green's a shady character. I have to learn about him. Who is this guy? Digging his past. I can't go back to him blind. And then there's something about his bootlegging. How'd Green get a connection like that? What's his source exactly? That sounds alright, he replied. So, where is it you're off to? I've got 3 leads. The bootlegger stable, who Green claims sent him the letter. The Tin Spoon Lounge, where I might learn more about Green's running schemes. And Mrs. Green, who could have given me more dirt on her husband. Frankie nodded in disapproval. Well, if you're ever stuck, come back and see me. You can never solve anything without talking it over. I smiled and went up the stairs. Alright, so we got 3 apparent locations here. Where do we start off with? Think we could get some information from the wife, just like that, or maybe let's go over to the lounge first and see how he got his connection, maybe? Yeah. Let's go for it. I hailed a driver, gave him the address, and stepped through the back door. We ain't got time to talk. We're almost done with this video, so I gotta hurry it up here. I peered out the window until we arrived. I opened the cab door in front of the North Beach warehouse with a wooden sign. The sign's text was too worn for me to decipher any of its English, but a small gray spoon was still visible below the letters. A tiny spoon! I rapped my knuckles twice over the large metal doors. A panel just above my head slid sideways to reveal a pair of eyes. The eyes looked me up and down, then just stared ahead. They were black and held no emotion. The room beyond was dimly lit, so I couldn't see much of their surrounding face. I cleared my throat, then a rumbling voice emerged from behind the door. Fill folk your cups, feel no distress at all, our great thoughts shrinking less. I looked at the eyes still unmoving. I understood, the doorman wanted a password. I thought I might have something in my notes that could help. Password. Yeah, I don't think we got anything over here. Use a password? I don't have one though, do I? I repeated his line back to him. Yep, that's what I just said to you. But that's not what I'm looking for. I wondered who I could ask about a speakeasy password. Well, I have an idea. It's probably the wife. Maybe. So, Green's house. So I'm liking how you do have to go to different places to kind of like acquire the proper evidence needed or statements or whatever in order to progress somewhere else, so that's pretty cool. It does give you that entire detective vibe. I ain't talking to you. Let me just get over to my location here. The Green's apartment was a section of an old Western Addition mansion. The owners had divided it for struggling families to rent after the 1906 fire. Once downtown had been rebuilt, people of means moved out of the area. Recent immigrants, mainly from Japan, rented most of the apartments in this part of town. Whoa. What happened to Mrs. Green? Came back home, started drinking away apparently. I knocked on the front door but didn't get a response. The latch was undone, so I pushed it open and stepped into the room. The room reeked of laudanum. Based on the smell, I imagined she'd have enough. Yeah, it's an opium, there we go. It's like a drug, but they used to prescribe it back then a lot, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure if it's so accepted now or even used at all. Let's see if we could find out about her. I found Mrs. Green slumped in her chair, eyes closed, head rocking slowly. "Hello, Mrs. Green," I said loudly. She let out a long moan from the chair, then lifted her head, but failed to raise her eyelids. I shook her lightly, and she moaned again, but nothing more. The gray trench coat was hanging in the doorway. It certainly looks identical to Lewis's. I searched the pockets and found no identifying marks. It might have been a different jacket, but its recent appearance was off-putting. Empty bottles. I opened a drawer at the backmost table, and in it were two train tickets. I mumbled, "St. Louis," to myself. But then came the cackling voice of Mrs. Green. "Ha! Forget about moving, Connor. I won't budge." Her head was raised, but her eyelids still remained closed. I asked her further questions, but her head just lolled back to where it had been. There was nothing else she'd say. Alrighty guys, we're going to wrap it up here. This is A Case of Distrust. I hope this video kind of gave you a bit of an insight as to what the game's all about. I'm digging the art style for a fact. I'm a big sucker for like detective mysteries like this, so this is fairly cool. I love the fact that you have to go out and like look for proper statements and clues and stuff like that in order to proceed. At the moment we have to wake up this woman is completely out of her gore though. So all the information for the game will be down below in case you want to pick this up for yourself. If you do want to see some more, do let me know. I will catch you next time.